Thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you, President Trump, for selecting me to serve as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. It's a privilege to be asked to serve my country in this office, and I stand here tonight truly honored and humbled.
That is Amy Coney Barrett. And with just days to go until the US presidential election, Donald Trump has managed to squeeze her on to the US Supreme Court. Her swearing in on Monday night has conservatives cheering and liberals crying foul. The 48-year-old has been a highly respected Circuit Court appeals judge for the past 3 years. She's also a devout Catholic and mother of 7, including 2 children she adopted from Haiti.
So I have my husband, Jesse, my son, JP, my daughter, Emma, my daughter, Juliet, my daughter, Tess, my daughter, Vivian, and my son, Liam.
She will now sit on the 9-member Supreme Court, replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the liberal justice who died last month, aged 87. Just look what that does to the balance of the court. 3 justices appointed by Democrat presidents and 6 appointed by Republican presidents.
This is my 3rd such nomination after Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh, and it is a very proud moment indeed.
Well, that frightens liberals because they fear the court may overturn laws relating to abortion and other issues, including healthcare and immigration.
I'm afraid for what this means for the current state of our country. I'm afraid for what it means for women's rights, for abortion.
And remember, Supreme Court justices have a job for life, so Justice Barrett could be there for decades.
She's 48 years old, so she could be on the U.S. Supreme Court for 30, maybe even 40 years.
The Democrats tried everything to stop Barrett being appointed, arguing that it was too close to the election.
It is a sham. It is a rush to put in a justice. Today, we are 21 days from the election. People are voting. Millions of people have already cast their ballots.
The Democrats' top man in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, even said it was against Ginsburg's dying wish.
She said, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed."
But Republicans have a slim majority in the Senate, and so Barrett was confirmed, leaving Democrats seething and talking about the nuclear option, packing the Supreme Court.
Vote now.
Are you gonna pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't want
you're a
to answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question is
radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen.
And so if Biden wins the White House and the Democrats take the Senate too, they could, in theory, pack the Supreme Court, expanding the number of justices from 9 to, well, whatever they deem necessary. And for many Americans, that would be hard to swallow.
And Senator Harris, if elected, would you pack the Supreme Court?
Susan.
Well, the satirists are poking fun, as you'd expect, but time to get serious now. And let's go straight to the Supreme Court. And there we have Kilmeny Dukart. Kilmeny, Justice Barrett sworn in on Monday. When does she actually get started?
Well, that's right, Matt. Amy Coney Barrett making history as the 5th woman to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court behind me. And after a really contentious nomination process, she'll be taking her seat on the bench on Tuesday. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, the court has been hearing oral arguments since the spring, and it does have the intention of continuing with that model for the November and December sessions, which means Barrett will be hearing these cases over the phone, and it'll be live streamed online for Americans to hear as well. But what's interesting is there's a big case coming up. That's on November 10th. At stake is the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, and at stake is the insurance of around 20 million Americans. This has been a concern for Democrats during this process, who have really grilled her on those Senate hearings, asking her whether she would, in fact, vote to strike down Obamacare.
Yes, the Supreme Court behind you, and I understand you have Congress the other side of the road. Just, that's the geography. Tell us, in terms of the Constitution, where does the Supreme Court fit into the overall governance of the United States?
Matt, the moniker on the building behind me is equal justice under the law, and there's a lot of power packed into that court. It is the highest court in the land. otherwise known as the judicial branch of government. 3 branches of government, the others being the executive branch, which is the president, and the legislative branch, which is Congress. And the justices in that court are essentially custodians of the Constitution. They decide whether to uphold laws or strike them down based on the articles that have been written out by the founding fathers. Huge decisions have been made in this building behind me, including ending segregation in this country, the First Amendment Acts, which is, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and also the right of women to choose pregnancy or abortion.
Yeah, and with the addition of Amy Coney Barrett, there are now 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices. Why is that important?
Well, Matt, this all goes back to those contentious hearings we were talking about earlier. Democrats have really been concerned that having another conservative Supreme Court appointment could dramatically influence the decisions that are made in the building behind me. In fact, Barrett's confirmation, while it does push it further to the right, critics have argued this could impact the way that the court interprets these laws. There are also cases that are going to impact the 2020 election. There are mail-in ballots, the deadlines for mail-in ballots. This is also going to be on the docket happening in swing states, including Pennsylvania, which is going to be a key decider in the 2020 election. Unclear what another conservative justice would do to that ruling, which could impact the outcome. Her appointment could also impact gun control and the government's regulatory powers. Now, we heard her when she was sworn in saying that she's going to rule without fear and favor. But these are cases, Matt, that are really going to be deciding factors of which way the court is going to go.
Right, and the whole thing is, Democrat critics have said they're not confident that she can separate out her personal beliefs enough to be able to uphold the US Constitution. And of course, Barrett has made it clear that she will not let her personal beliefs influence her rulings. Despite this reassurance, though, her opponents have attacked her from the moment President Trump made his announcement.
I stand before you today to fulfill one of my highest and most important duties, the nomination of a Supreme Court Justice, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
I love the United States, and I love the United States Constitution.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett.
She could be on the U.S. Supreme Court for 30, maybe even 40 years.
Reshaping American law on abortion rights, health care, religion, and guns for decades.
Who is Amy Coney Barrett, and what does her record tell us about what she might be like on the High Court?
The U.S. Supreme Court will take up a legal challenge to the Affordable Care Act.
Is going to be heard in November.
It's very clear from her writings that she will be the vote that takes away health care for millions of Americans.
And I assure you that I am not. I'm not hostile to the ACA. I'm not hostile to any statute that you pass.
This is the first time in American history that we've nominated a woman who's unashamedly pro-life.
In 2003, she suggested that a key Supreme Court decision upholding Roe v. Wade and a right to abortion was wrongly decided.
She has called the practice, quote, always immoral. She is a devout Catholic, but has said that her personal beliefs do not dictate her legal decisions.
It's never appropriate for a judge to impose that judge's personal convictions, whether they derive from faith or anywhere else. Judges can't just wake up one day and say, I have an agenda, I like guns, I hate guns, I like abortion, I hate abortion, and walk in like a royal queen and impose, their will on the world. I will do my job without any fear or favor, independently of both the political branches and of my own preferences.
Well, is it possible to put one's personal beliefs aside in order to uphold the Constitution? Let's put it to our guest now. Titus Nichols is a trial attorney and member of the Supreme Court Bar. Esther Valdez is an immigration lawyer and Republican strategist. And Eric Johnston is also a lawyer and member of the Supreme Court Bar and a prominent anti-abortion campaigner in Alabama. Titus, I'd like to start with you. We've seen clips from the vetting process. Do you think that they were fair on Amy Coney Barrett?
I honestly think it was a situation of you're dealing with the U.S. Senate that may have some lawyers, but they're not constitutional scholars. They have not practiced law in a significant number of years. So for the most part, they were throwing softball questions to the judge because they knew that she would not give any explicit or specific answers to their questions. So it was really a matter of just going through the motions because the Democrats knew that the Republicans had the votes to confirm her.
Esther, is that what you saw?
I believe it was a strategic ploy by the Democrats to avoid making any kind of religious aspersions to Amy Coney Barrett, realizing that the American electorate would not take kindly to any kind of religious litmus test to be able to practice law and to be a Supreme Court justice. This has already been decided in our U.S. Constitution, where there should be no religious test, and to ensure the freedom of religion to be exercised freely and to be interpreted without any kind of bias. And that came forth in Amy Coney Barrett's responses, saying that she would not hold her religious biases in interpreting the original intent of the Constitution. And that's exactly what the American people wanted. That's what we deserved, and that's what we got.
Titus, isn't that all anyone can expect from a prospective justice, that they are willing to put their personal beliefs to one side in order to uphold the Constitution?
That's what they expect, and that is the response that candidates give when they are sent to the Senate to be confirmed. But the reality is no judge puts their personal bias completely outside of their decisions. They might not put it on paper, but every judge steps into a case with their own lived experiences. And unfortunately, it goes into what their eventual order will be. While, yes, it is true the Democrats were not going to attack Judge Barrett on her religious beliefs, but they did want to point out that any case coming before her, particularly cases dealing with abortion, she's going to view it through the lens of her background. So that is a concern that Democrats had, because when you have a case that's so divisive, such as abortion, it really is foolish to say that a judge will completely put aside their beliefs and only look at the law. In fact, Judge Amy Coney Barrett refused to say that Roe versus Wade is established precedent. Instead, she went and said that it's not super precedent, which doesn't make sense at all.
The fact that there's still several controversies surrounding Roe v. Wade is what she alluded to when saying that it was not a super precedent. There's still over 300 laws have been passed since 2011 regarding restrictions on abortion law, meaning that Roe versus Wade, just like Clarence Thomas said, was wrongly decided. It didn't have a constitutional basis, and they performed legal gymnastics to expand the right to privacy to include a woman's right to kill her own child. So in that respect, it's not a stretch of the imagination to see that Amy Coney Barrett, while entertaining the abortion issue before the Supreme Court, she will be able to separate her biases and also be able to look at the plain text of the Constitution as the original framers intended, using the language and using the legal philosophy of the time that it was drafted, and separating the culture and the cultural context to give it a contemporary interpretation that it was never intended to do.
Well, unfortunately, we have lost the signal to Esther Valdez, but we still have our other two guests with us. And we're going to continue with analyzing the abortion laws in the United States. Let's take a quick look now at Roe versus Wade. This is the 1973 Supreme Court case that legalized abortion in America. It was named after Jane Roe, real name Norma McCorvey, who wanted to have an abortion which at the time was illegal in Texas. Now, she ended up suing her local district attorney, Henry Wade, hence the name Roe versus Wade, and the Supreme Court rulings in Roe versus Wade and in subsequent cases established that under the 14th Amendment protecting the right to privacy, a woman did have the right to an abortion before the fetus is viable, i.e. can survive outside the womb, which is between 24 and 28 weeks, so up to around 7 months. But of course, the Supreme Court can't just start unpicking or overturning laws. It has to do that when a case is brought before it. And our next guest, Eric Johnston, who is from Alabama, has done just that. Eric, just tell us about your efforts to have your case heard at the Supreme Court.
Yes, we passed a statute in the Alabama legislature a year before last that would be a direct affront to Roe, because it says that life begins when the child is in utero, which goes far below the Roe standard or the later Casey standard. That law was passed by the Alabama legislature. It's currently in the district court, federal court in Alabama. From there, it will go to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals for review. Both of those courts will of necessity have to go by the precedent of the constitutional question to the U.S. Supreme Court, and hopefully it will grant review of that case.
So you have passed a law which you know is unconstitutional and cannot be enacted in order for it to go up to the Supreme Court to challenge Roe versus Wade. And can you just tell us, your standard in your law is to say that there is a person there once the egg is in the uterus. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We use the standard from our criminal law that if the child can be determined to be in utero, under the criminal law, a prosecutor will know that there's a person there, and it would be a crime to kill that child other than abortion. Abortion is an exception to that law as it stands. And so what we are using is that same definition to say that if the child is in utero, the fertilized egg is implanted in the uterine wall, then it's a child, and it is not viable, which is the standard of Roe. Roe says the state may prohibit abortion after viability, that is, after a child can live outside the womb, but we are saying we need to take it below that standard because we can prove scientifically now, which we could not do in 1973, that there is a person there and the humanity of that person needs to be recognized.
Titus, what is the likelihood that cases like this one could actually lead to Roe versus Wade being overturned?
Individually, if it was just one state, the likelihood would be very low. However, what you're seeing in America is that the Republican and other conservatives have brought these similar types of laws in multiple states. In my home state of Georgia, the governor, Brian Kemp, signed off on a similar heartbeat law saying that abortion would not be admissible after 6 weeks. 6 weeks is typically when most people find out that a woman is pregnant. And so by bringing these types of laws in multiple states, it might get shot down in 1 or 2 states, but then there's the possibility that eventually one state will work its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court, with a super conservative majority, will probably grant cert to hear that case. Then at that point, it becomes a question of what is the ultimate decision going to be? Do we believe that the Supreme Court will completely prohibit abortion? Probably not. But they will just pick at the protections offered by Roe by saying, well, this state is allowed to pass this law, or these states have more latitude in determining the restrictions that they're allowed to put on abortion.
Eric Johnston, Roe versus Wade says that abortion is legal up to the point of viability. Why is it then that we see in states like New York, there are new laws under the governor there, Andrew Cuomo, that allow abortions that are almost right up to just before birth?
The Roe versus Wade case says that after viability, states may prohibit abortion. They do not say they have to. Subsequent cases have enforced that principle. So in New York, they have the right, if they want to say that you can do an abortion up to the time of birth. And in Virginia, the Virginia governor even said at one point, and he was a pediatrician and before he became governor, that the state could have a law that would permit you to determine after the child was born whether you wanted to keep the child or let the child die. And that, of course, has happened in some jurisdictions. And that would be murder if the child was actually born alive. But there's no restriction on states to say you have to prohibit abortion after viability, which is about 20 weeks, give or take a 4-week margin of error.
Titus, a final question. If Joe Biden wins the White House and the Democrats take the Senate, what are the chances that they are going to pack the Supreme Court?
Well, that's a loaded term, pack the Supreme Court, because it's being used by Republicans as if Democrats are doing something illegal, unconstitutional. Number one, the Constitution does not set the number of justices that sit on Supreme Court. It's been changed at least 7 times in American history. In fact, there used to be 10 Supreme Court justices on the court. Number two, Republicans have engaged at court packing on the state level. All across the country, you have at least, I believe, 11 states that have enlarged in their Supreme Court by adding more justices. So when the GOP does it, it's just considered adding more judges to the bench in order to help judicial efficiency. But when the Democrats even suggest it, then there's this fear-mongering as if they're doing something unconstitutional. But going back to the original question, what's the likelihood? It really depends on how large of a majority the Democrats win.
Titus Nichols and Eric Johnston, thank you so much for your contributions to the Nexus. Now, before we go, we're going to take a closer look at Amy Coney Barrett as a person. Before becoming a justice on the Supreme Court, she was a judge on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, where she worked with our next guest, John Adams. John, welcome to the Nexus. You worked with her for some time. Tell us, what was she like to work with?
I was privileged to be among Justice Barrett's first set of law clerks from 2017 to 2018. And during that time, I watched her become the person she is today as a judge. She was a professor before then, and then I joined her on her first day. She became Judge Barrett, and now she is Justice Barrett. Since I haven't been able to spend every day with her, it's been all downhill professionally since then. It was quite remarkable to watch someone balance all the different hats that she wears and to see her approach the most complicated legal problems of our day and to do so with an open mind and fair consideration to all sides of the argument, and then to press her law clerks, me included, about our views and to debate with us. She loves to debate, just like her mentor, Justice Scalia, and then to arrive at the conclusion and then to see the output that she put in her opinions, and to do so with a lot of fun as well. We would often have a good laugh, or some other moments that are beautiful images in my mind. To see her children play at her feet as she decided cases is something that I'll always remember.
Justice Barrett's critics were essentially trying to say that she couldn't uphold the Constitution because of her deeply held personal beliefs. What do you make of that argument?
Judge Barrett is someone with deep personal convictions and personal beliefs, as I would hope that anyone would be, particularly people in public office. But just because someone like Judge Barrett has personal beliefs doesn't mean that she would allow those beliefs to intrude into her judicial functions as a judge sitting on the 7th Circuit or someone sitting on the United States Supreme Court. She has made explicitly clear that her personal beliefs or even public pressure have no bearing on how she decides cases as a judge. And that's something that I've seen when I was with her for a year, every day for a year.
With reference to her rulings, say, on abortion, can you back that up?
I can back that up, Matthew, specifically in a case called Price v. Chicago that dealt with an abortion case. It was a First Amendment case where the state passed the law that said people cannot counsel people going into abortion clinics within 8 feet of as they move into in a clinic. And that's a First Amendment case. There are implications regarding free speech and abortion. And Judge Barrett sat on a panel that upheld that rule, that counselors cannot intrude within 8 feet of someone going into an abortion clinic. And that shows that her personal convictions have no bearing on how she rules as a judge. She follows the rule of law and applies it neutrally.
We saw some moving testimony from a former student of hers, Laura Wolk. Laura's the first blind woman to be a clerk at the Supreme Court. Let's just listen for a second.
Her brilliance is matched only by her compassion, and her integrity is unassailable. I am not speaking in mere abstractions here. Rather, I have experienced these characteristics firsthand with life-changing results.
John, you're friends with Laura. How did Justice Barrett help her?
Well, we don't know that specifically, and that attests to Justice Barrett's humility. As Laura testified on Capitol Hill, I believe almost 2 weeks ago now, that she went into her office at one point and said, "Professor Barrett, I'm having trouble. I'm a blind student. I don't have the technology to assist me in my studies of the law." As any lawyer can attest, you just read thousands of pages at any given point in time, or in Laura's case, listen to thousands of pages of words. And Laura said, "I don't have any technology at this point to help me." And at that point, Professor Barrett looked at her and said, "Laura, this isn't your problem anymore. This is my problem." And with no time, Laura had the technology that she needed to thrive in law school and beyond law school. And to this day, Laura doesn't know what Judge Barrett did or Justice Barrett did, but she took care of her. And she went on to become the first blind Supreme Court clerk, which is just so impressive.
Final question for you, John. You've seen Justice Barrett working very, very long hours. She's also a very hands-on mum to 7 children. How on earth does she manage to get it all done?
Matthew, if I knew the answer to that, I would bottle it and sell it, and then hopefully come on your program to market it. I don't know how Judge Barrett does it. Her commitment to the law is matched only by her commitment to family. And it was so impressive for me to be able to see her wear all the different hats that she wears, often simultaneously: mother of 7, judge, law professor, community volunteer, loving spouse, and friend to so many, and mentor to her law clerks and her students. And she does so with just so much grace, fortitude, and poise. The same demeanor that we saw on display over the last few weeks as she went through this grueling and excruciating process. But she does so with so much patience and so much joy every step of the way. And it's something to behold.
Well, John Adams, thank you so much for your personal insight there on the new Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you for having me. It's been great being with you, Matthew.
And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, you can see this episode and all our previous episodes on our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Until next week then, goodbye.